We all know COVID has had a major impact on many areas of life, but specifically, what are the impacts that we've seen on marriages?
Well, friends, welcome back to the Ferguson home. Keith and Barie here, and thanks so much for watching this week's video. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, make sure you go ahead and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to leave a comment on this week's video. Today we want to talk about COVID and marriage, and so we've all heard talks about how COVID has impacted all of us over these last 16 months. And on today's video, Barie and I want to share with you a talk that we heard from a professional counselor who's part of our association, and she gave us 3 insights that the professional counselor community has been seeing in people's lives because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to just take those realities and apply them to marriage, and just discuss with all of you kind of how we see that working out in our own marriage, and maybe give you a little bit of insight on how you can apply these principles into your marriage as well.
Yeah, and just to to give you the space to discuss this with your spouse. Like, how do you see that it's impacted our marriage and each other? We also want to introduce you to our fly friend that is going to be joining us. We cannot get rid of it.
Flies are bad this time of year.
Okay,
so
number one.
First one that she shared with us is that everybody has been impacted with a loss of social skills during the pandemic, and that just makes sense because we've been doing more stuff over Zoom, we've been doing less things in person, we've been inside more, we've been at home more, we've been working from home, doing church from home, and so just less social interaction. And it's funny how much you forget how to do basic social things with other people.
I've forgotten how to dress up. That's been my biggest thing. Every time, now when somebody says you want to go eat or something, I'm like,
I have to get out of my pajamas?
I don't know if I want to go or not, because that requires makeup and an outfit, and so that's just one of the ways.
So Barie and I were just talking about how that lack of social skills impacts our marriage, that lack of going out and being with people. And you had a good insight of just saying, like, when we're not interacting with people outside of our marriage, we tend to put more pressure inside of our marriage. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, just if you don't have a community to process life with and other people, you start expecting, without even knowing it, expecting your spouse to meet those needs, to fulfill all those relationship gaps you're having. And they can't. So you're just setting them up for failure. You're setting yourself up to be disappointed because they're not going to be able to meet the needs that a community can meet.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to share with you on this point is just extend more grace to each other right now, especially if your spouse is doing things that are a little different than normal. It's like, man, why are you talking that way or interacting that way, or that's not how you used to do? Well, that's true for all of us. We're just kind of all learning how to interact with other people again. And so I think one of the things we want to say to you, applying this to marriage, is what Barie's saying is, don't put all that pressure on your spouse to meet all your needs, but also extend extra grace. Just understand that we're all relearning how to enter the world and interact with people, and relearning those skills. And so just talk about that with your spouse. If you're like, man, I feel like we're not connecting like we used to, it could be related to this issue of just losing some social ability during the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think too, we're all a little bit timid about getting in conversations with people that we haven't seen over this past year, because there's been so much division among various topics that we just don't even know, can we talk about this? Right. So, we've heard where marriages are struggling just because within the family, like within like parents or grandparents, the differences of opinion on politics or wearing masks or all these things that in the big scheme of life are not that big of a deal. Like, we won't remember it, in a couple of years. Maybe we will, but it's not, we shouldn't. And so I just think that we're kind of timid to be authentic and real, but then none of us want surface. Like, we're not going to thrive if we're just making small talk with everybody we meet. But that's a temptation, and so we're going to have to fight against that and learn how to be authentic. Maybe don't dive into those like really hard, divisive topics at the beginning, but also learn how to be real about how you're struggling or how you're, what's going well, just that balance.
So first principle is we've all had the impact of losing some social skills. We want to encourage you to get back out there, learn how to do those things again, and hopefully that will help your marriage relationship. The second impact for all of us is we've all experienced compassion fatigue. And this has to do with just the amount of negative information we've all heard over the last 16 months. And so the best way to kind of explain this is when you're getting, your news source every day and it's like this many people died and this many people got sick today and this is what's happening around the world, that at the beginning you feel a lot of compassion around that, a lot of like, oh man, that's so sad. But as that happens over time, you start to kind of build this wall around your heart, and counselors call that compassion fatigue. Like, I just can't take that much bad news over time without just having some fatigue of like, oh, I just don't care anymore, and some of that self-protection. But that compassion fatigue can really show up in your marriage because all of a sudden your spouse is sharing something with you that's hard in their life, and you don't have the empathy that you need to really hear them and listen to them because you're experiencing all this.
You built new habits to protect yourself, so you built these habits to not connect emotionally or, empathetically.
Yeah, so one of the things we'd encourage you with is just one of the skills we've talked a lot about on Ferguson Home is active listening, to make sure you're actually hearing what your spouse is saying. And if you find yourself in that boat where you're like, yeah, man, that compassion fatigue describes me, you may just acknowledge that to your spouse too and go, hey, I'm sorry, I just haven't been listening very well or really caring very well because of what I've just been processing over the last 16 months, and maybe asking forgiveness for that, and then just working on that active listening.
Yeah, and that actually kind of takes us into our third point, because I think sometimes to get back into a healthy space where we can listen compassionately and connect emotionally, we're going to have to really hone in on protecting our minds from what we're taking in for a season. So how does that relate to point 3?
Well, the third one that this counselor friend shared with us is that so many people have been impacted by screen addiction during COVID. And when she said that, it just really spoke to me that we have all filled this time that we've had at home with binging Netflix or Amazon Prime videos or Hulu or whatever.
Watching news to keep up with what's going on.
So we've got that thing that's going on, and then also just we've fallen deeper into the pit of social media addiction and kind of living vicariously through what other people are doing because we've kind of felt trapped, what's going on with our own life. So you and I have talked about this a lot over time, but how does that screen addiction impact marriage? Like, how does that impact a marriage relationship?
What was the documentary on Netflix, Social Network? Or Social Dilemma?
Yeah, I think Social Dilemma, yeah.
Something with social in it. I think it's Social Dilemma on Netflix, but if you haven't watched that, I would so encourage you to watch it. It's very eye-opening about how your social media feeds, like there are so many people working in the background that are getting paid the big bucks to make sure it's curated to you. And so we can really falsely think that that's reality.
Right.
The news we're getting on our Twitter feed, the Facebook post, and what people are posting, but what we might not realize is how much it's curated. So that then you start thinking that there's no one else, that believes different, that everyone's like you or whatever, which this is a side note. But I think too, it helped us when we watched that to even our teenagers want to take a break from social media because you realize how, even something as simple as on messages now, it has the little 3 dots when someone's responding. So what does that do? That keeps us on our phone looking, and then we start checking other things while we're doing it. So even stuff simple like that really kind of was eye-opening to all of our family of like, wow, it's just built to get us addicted.
Yeah, you're going up against $1 billion industry that wants to keep you glued to your screen. And where that shows up in marriage is how many times you and I talked about getting into bed at night and not connecting with each other because we're on a screen, And so think about that in your own marriage. Think about those moments where you should be connecting with each other, but you're not. You're on a screen. So maybe in the day after coming home from work and you've got a moment to kind of catch up, but you don't because your first instinct is let's get on my phone and see what's going on, or bedtime, or you're on a date with your spouse and both of you are on your phones, So just some of those like practical things to watch out for and respond to that and say, hey, I'm not going to give into that. I'm going to get off of these apps, these platforms. I'm going to take a break. for the sake of our marriage relationship. It's really important.
Yeah, one just fun thing to try to see if you are addicted to your screen is to take off all the apps that you tend to go to when you're bored or you're down, or the things that you tend to run to. So whether that be Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or whatever, take them off. And then notice how many times you grab your phone and then realize, oh, I can't do that, and you put it back down. And just count how many times in an hour or a day that you do that, and it is so eye-opening.
Absolutely.
Freaks me out.
We hope this video has been helpful to you, just bringing some insight in what COVID has done to us and to our marriages. And we're praying for you that you come out of this COVID season thriving. And if you are in the Round Rock area, you're looking for help with your marriage, we still have a few spots for Reengage in the fall that starts on August 18th. We'd love to have you sign up for that at cityview.church. And so we pray God's blessing on you. Let us know in the comments what you think about this video, how COVID's impacted you. We'd love to hear from you.